When you think mafia, certain images probably jump to mind, right?
Yeah.
But the real story, especially its history, it's often way more complex than the movies let on.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we're really digging into a specific, crucial moment, early 1930s New York City.
Yeah.
This wasn't just, random gang violence. It was this period of massive change, like a real turning point that basically redrew the map for organized crime in America.
That's exactly right. It's easy to picture it as static, but this era, it was incredibly dynamic. You had this uh, intense power struggle, sure, but out of that chaos came, well, whole new system.
The new system.
Yeah, we'll get into the main players, the brutal calculations behind their moves, and how this whole violent mess eventually led to a structure that surprisingly lasted for a long time. It tells you a lot about power, really.
Okay, so let's set the scene. New York, 1920s. There's one name that really stands out first, doesn't there? Giuseppe Maseria. Joe the boss.
Right, Joe the Boss. He was the man, the dominant figure in the underworld at that time.
And his crew, his faction, it was mostly guys with roots back in southern Italy, right? Sicily, Calabria, Campania.
Exactly. Sicilians and 'Ndrangheta connections from Calabria, Camorra from Campania. Not like one single group, but, shared backgrounds, similar ways of doing things. That was his base.
And some pretty big names were under his umbrella even back then. People like Lucky Luciano.
Yep, Luciano, Albert Anastasia, the Mad Hatter, Vito Genovese, Alfred Mineo.
Willie Moretti, Joe Adonis, Frank Costello. I mean, these guys became huge later on.
They did. They were all ambitious guys, sort of making their way up under Maseria's rule, but, power like that, it always attracts challenges.
And that's where the other side comes in.
Exactly. A rival group started to coalesce. This one drew heavily from a specific part of Sicily, Castellammarese del Golfo, the Castellammarese.
Okay.
And their leader, the guy stepping up to challenge Maseria, was Salvatore Maranzano.
So you've got these two camps, basically. Messeri's crew, mostly Southern Italians, and Maranzano's, mainly Castellammarese, both wanting control of New York.
Yeah, control of the rackets, the territory, everything. You can just feel the tension building, can't you? It's like a collision waiting to happen.
Definitely. The stakes must have been massive. We're not just talking about who runs a neighborhood speakeasy.
No, no. This was about who calls the shots. Who sets the rules for the entire underworld economy in the city? Ultimate authority.
So things really kicked off February 1930. That sounds like a key moment. Maseria ordered a hit on Gaspar Milazzo, but in Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit. It seems far, but it shows how interconnected things were. Milazzo was Castellammarese himself, and he ran the Unionia Siciliana there.
Okay.
The story goes Maseria felt Milazzo had disrespected him in some dispute connected to the Chicago outfit, Al Capone. By taking him out, Maseria was sending a message. My reach is long, don't cross me anywhere.
Wow. Okay. And then, almost right after, Maseria turns on one of his own guys, Gaetano Reina, killed later that same month.
That's right. And reportedly, the triggerman was Vito Genovese, acting on Maseria's orders.
That really escalated things inside his own faction.
Why take out Reina?
Well, the thinking is, Maseria had these secret deals going on. He was allied with Tommy Gagliano, Tommy Lucchese, Dominic Petrilli. Maybe Reina was getting in the way, or maybe Maseria just wanted to solidify things with his hidden partners.
But wouldn't that weaken him, taking out one of his own lieutenants?
You'd think so, but look what happened next. Reina's family, obviously feeling completely betrayed.
Yeah.
They switched sides, threw their support behind Maranzano. So Maseria's move to consolidate power actually ended up beefing up his rival's crew. It just shows how complex and backstabbing these things were.
Definitely treacherous. And Reina wasn't the last one, right? Vito Bonventre was also targeted.
Right. Bonventre was another Castellammarese, part of Niccolo Sciro's gang. Maseria saw him and others like him in Sciro's group as a rising threat. Too many Castellammares gaining influence, too close for comfort.
So another potential rival to be eliminated.
Pretty much. First, Maseria put the squeeze on the boss, Sciro. Forced him to pay, what was it, $10,000?
Yeah.
A huge sum then. And made him step down.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Flexing his muscle.
Exactly. And then, just a few months later, July 1930, Bonventre is gunned down outside his garage. It's clear by this point this isn't just jockeying for position anymore, it's war. Open war.
It sounds incredibly bloody and, frankly, chaotic. How did it eventually end? It feels like it could have just gone on forever.
Well, it was brutal. But eventually, one side gained the upper hand. Salvatore Maranzano's faction. Maybe better strategy, maybe just more ruthless, maybe Maseria's internal betrayals caught up with him, whatever the reason they came out on top.
And Maseria himself was killed in April 31. Right.
It's the one. Taken out while having lunch, famously. And with him gone, Maranzano was the undisputed winner of the Castellammarese War.
So victory. And his first move is, what, to completely change the game? This is where the five families come in.
Exactly. Maranzano, in his moment of triumph, decides to impose order. He basically takes all the Italian-American gangs in New York and reorganizes them, creates 5 distinct groups, the families, each with its own boss, its own turf, trying to structure the chaos.
Okay, that makes some sense after a war, but then...
Yeah, he declares himself capo di tutti I capi.
The boss of all bosses.
The boss of all bosses. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? He just fought a war against the guy who acted like the boss of all bosses.
And now he wants the title himself. It seems like he didn't learn the lesson.
That's a really sharp point. He seemed to think the problem wasn't the position itself, just who held it. And that contradiction, that ambition, it didn't sit well with everyone, especially the younger guys.
And everyone included Lucky Luciano, presumably, because Maranzano's reign as the top boss was incredibly short.
Blink and you miss it, almost.
Yeah.
Just a few months after his big victory in reorganization, September 1931, Maranzano gets assassinated.
And the architect behind that.
Lucky Luciano, a key player from Maseria's side, the side that supposedly lost the war.
That's quite the turnaround. What was Luciano's thinking? Why take out the new top dog so quickly?
Well, Luciano and his allies, guys like Genovese, Castello, they saw Maranzano as, frankly, worse than Maseria. More greedy, more power-obsessed, and just too old school, too dictatorial.
So not just a power grab, but a disagreement on how things should be run.
Exactly. They wanted something different, something more, maybe business-like, less focused on those old Sicilian traditions and more on a modern American-style operation. Maranzano represented the past they wanted to move beyond.
So getting rid of Maranzano wasn't just about Luciano taking the top spot for himself. He had a different plan entirely.
Precisely. And what he did next was honestly revolutionary for the Mafia. Instead of saying, okay, I'm the boss of all bosses now, he did something completely different. He created the Commission.
The Commission. Okay, what exactly was that? Like a board of directors?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. A governing council. It was a power-sharing deal. The idea was that the heads of the major families, initially those 5 families Maranzano had set up, would have essentially equal standing.
Equal standing. After all that fighting for supremacy, why?
The main goal, the stated goal at least, was to stop this from happening again. To avoid another huge, bloody war like the one they'd just lived through. Give each family a seat at the table, a way to sort out disputes, divvy up territory, make rules, without resorting to mass murder.
So like internal diplomacy instead of constant warfare.
Kind of, yeah. An attempt to bring some stability, even within a criminal enterprise. Checks and balances, you could say.
And who were the first bosses on this commission, sitting around that table?
Well, initially, you had Luciano heading one family, obviously.
Yeah.
Then Joe Profaci, Tommy Galliano, Vincent Mangano, and for a very short time, Maranzano himself. Before Luciano had him killed, then his spot was filled. That basic 5-family structure overseen by the commission really became the blueprint for decades.
It's fascinating. All that violence, all that betrayal, and it leads to something almost, well, corporate in its structure. A board making decisions.
It is remarkable. You can see the grim logic, maybe, moving from constant destructive infighting to a system designed, at least in theory, for more stability and, let's be honest, more efficient profit-making.
And that structure, the commission, the 5 families, that really defined the American Mafia for a long time after, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at how organized crime operated in the U.S. for the next 50, 60 years, the commission was central. It mediated disputes, approved bosses, sometimes ordered hits, yes, but it maintained that basic framework established back in 31. The names changed, families rose and fell in influence, but that core idea of a collective leadership born from that war persisted.
So just to recap the whirlwind, we had Maseria on top, then Maranzano challenges him, this brutal Castellammarese War breaks out. Maranzano wins briefly, declares himself boss of all bosses, reorganizes things.
Right.
Then Luciano takes him out, says no more boss of bosses, and creates the commission to share power among the 5 families, a huge pivot.
A fundamental shift. It really changed everything, moving away from that single, all-powerful dictator model toward something more. Collaborative, maybe. Still incredibly dangerous and criminal, of course, but collaborative in its own way. It was about ensuring the survival and prosperity of the organization as a whole.
It does make you think, doesn't it, about how that raw drive for power, even in the underworld, can lead first to incredible destruction and then sometimes to building systems, trying to impose order on the chaos, even if it's a criminal order.
That's a great takeaway. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Where else do we see that pattern? That impulse for total control eventually leading, maybe out of sheer necessity, to creating frameworks, rules, ways to
Or
cooperate, even among rivals. Something to chew on.